The spotlight is much more difficult to maneuver than any other light. So I'm going to do my darndest here to unravel the mystery of controlling the spotlight. To follow along, go to Working Files, go to Photoshop Projects, and open up Lighting. Alright, let's take a look at this guy by opening it up there, and we're going to switch from the infinite light down to the spotlight. There you go. And let me just take a quick look at that. If I click on the selection tool, you're going to see the spotlight appear, and right off the bat, this kind of throws you off. You're not really sure what you're looking at here. Is it pointing toward us? Is it pointing away from us? What do these lines mean? It is a little confusing. So what I want to do here is I want to show you another way to look at the spotlight, then we'll come back to this. So let's add a new layer, like that. Let's fill it with a color. So I'll go up to Edit, Fill. You can fill it with any color you want, but I'm going to go with a kind of a light blue here, something like that. So I can see the light's effect on it. Click OK, click OK. Close these other guys down below here because we're going to have them showing up every so often as we work on this layer here. So let's just turn them off. Click on this layer to make it active, and we're going to extrude it. Going up here, Extrusion, Create. Go up here, let's change it to something rather than 2000. You can bring it down to 50 is fine, something like that. Just a small extrusion. Now I want to take the infinite light that comes with this by default, click on it and change it to the spotlight. So I go over here to the light properties and change it to spot. There you go. And now you get this thing, which right off the bat is like, wow, what do I do with all of this, right? Well, let's just try to see what this is all about. There are a number of ways to control the spotlight. It can go left, right, up, down, twist around, all kinds of things. So the two controls that I rely on most are the rotation control and the drag control. The slide control allows you to pull the spotlight in and out. So you can rely on that if you want to move it closer to an object or farther away. But basically, when you're going left, right, up, down, and trying to move the spot around, you use these two guys, rotation and drag. Now drag moves the spotlight. So I'll just drag here left or right. What's going on here? What's the stuff down here and what's that pointing at? What happens is the spotlight puts out this long thing here, and this is really the center of interest of the spotlight, but it's on the other side of our card here. What we're seeing here is the spotlight not at its full size because the card is cutting it off, and this would be the full size if the card weren't in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the card a little bit. I'm going to click on the rotation tool here and click away from here to turn off the spotlight. And I'm going to move the scene around like that. Let's see it like so. Now let's turn the spotlight on by clicking this and going back to the spotlight. Now you see the spotlight's kind of off in the distance here. Let's do Controller Command minus a couple times, and there's the spotlight there. So you see it's shining from here down at the card, and then it would continue over here if the card weren't in the way. So these guys define the hot spot in the middle of the spotlight, and this is the cone. Right here, the in-between stuff, you might want to call that the penumbra. Usually the penumbra refers to a shadow, but just think about this as being the soft edge of the spotlight. So if you look over here, the soft edge is right around there, and it would be out here if the card weren't in the way. So I can change the hotspot just by hovering over here, and this time the cursor really does work. When we narrow it down like this, you have a wider penumbra. It's a softer looking spotlight. If I take this guy and pull it in, that'll narrow it down and make it a sharper looking spotlight to the point where you can't go any farther, you can't get any closer, but you do move the inner one as well. You can pull it back out again. You don't so much need to worry about this ending point. You just look at the results. If you try to manipulate this such that this is falling right on the surface, you're just going to get really frustrated. It's best just to control this while looking at that. So to see how that works, I'm going to click away to get the current view and twist this back a bit. And turn on the spotlight again by clicking on it like that. Now here are these controls. They're on the other side of this wall, but you can still see them here. Hover over there, I get that little arrow, and I can pull it in, and we can see the results here. So again, you don't need to worry so much about being at the end. You can just see your results as you work on them from this point. Now I want to try to manipulate the location of the spotlight, and that's kind of tricky. The way we do that is with these two move tools, the rotation and the drag. You can use other ones, but these are the two go-to tools for me. First of all, I want to move where the light is shining. I use the rotation tool for that. So if I want to move it to the right, I take my rotation tool and move it to the left. Kind of counterintuitive. Right off the bat, it's kind of tricky to figure that out. If I want to move the light up, I pull it down. If I want to move it down, I pull it up. Backwards, right? If I want to move the light itself, meaning the source, I use the drag tool. I can drag it up and down. So if I drag it down, it really does go down. But notice how the light also goes down too. It's a little confusing. In fact, this point of interest, as it's called, is not really moving, but since it's beyond the card, it looks like it is. So you need to kind of manipulate two things at once, or manipulate one thing right after the other. But I'm pulling the light down, physically down, and it's still pointing toward the card. Now if I want to bring the light up, I go back to the rotation tool, and I pull down to bring the light up, right? Oh, confusing. But there you go. Now we got it pointed right at there. We can go back over and hover over these guys. Change the hotspot, make it wider. Change the cone, narrow it down to make it a sharper focus. Like that. Now, why is that light so small? Because these guys are actually beyond the end of the card, so that's the results here. But look at what you get here, and let that be your guide, not these guys. Bring that out again to decide, where do you want the light to be? How big do you want it to be? All right, I want to change the position of the light again while holding the spot in more or less the same place. So I go back to the drag tool, I drag it left, and now the spot is trying to stay in the same place. But again, the card here is between the source of the light where the light is trying to fall, so the light does move here as I go left and right. I think you get a sense of how you can move this around, physically move the source like that using the drag tool. If I want to move the light closer or farther, again I use the slide, pull it out like this, that brings it farther away, push it in like that, brings it closer. So left and right, up and down, I use the drag, closer or farther, I use the slide. And then the rotation I use to move the light itself where it's pointing. To move it to the left, I drag right. To move it to the right, I drag left. Okay, now that takes care of some relatively simple stuff. But down here, there's something called light fall off, and this gets really confusing. I'll click on that, and what's going on with light fall off? That determines the distance that the light goes and the intensity that it has along that distance. Right now, it's kind of tricky to see. I'm going to take the light and kind of angle it off a little bit. Got my rotation tool here, I'm going to pull it to the right, have it shine that way. Now it's getting kind of modeled because it's kind of going at a sharp angle against there. And you see these two circles that define the fall off end and the fall off start. And those two places are set over here by these numbers here. Hold on the shift key here, I can move that around. Just as I use the shift key with a shadow, I can use the shift key with the fall off start and end. Pull that back and forth like that. This will be more intuitive when we look at the other layer when we see the letters. We can control the fall off here with the shift key, move it around, or we can use these numbers over here. Let's go down to the first layer we had before. Turn on our pasture text and our pasture background and make the pasture text active. That's the 3D layer. And there's our spotlight again. Again, it's kind of tricky to see what's going on, so you might want to try an orthographic view here. I'm going to go over here and make sure this is the top, and we'll swap views. And there's our light out there, shining right there on our text. So now let's take the drag tool here and see what happens. I'm just going to drag to the right. I can click anywhere here. It doesn't have to be right on top of this guy. I can drag it to the right like so. See how that works? It moves the whole thing left and right. If I take my rotation tool now and pull it to the right, it's actually moving the light to the right. See that? But it's pointing it to the left. That's what's kind of counterintuitive about it. Up and down, like so. So let's go back to the perspective view. What I'd like to do is position the light so it's pointing at the P and so that the light itself is way to the left of the P, so it's sort of shining down the text. It's kind of tricky to do that. So the first order of business is to move the source. Go over here to the drag tool. I'm going to drag it to the left. So I just push it to the left like that. There you go. And notice that the light tries to stay pointing where it was always pointing. But again, the light is way back here. The end point of the light is out here someplace. And so we're kind of cutting it off here. So it doesn't quite stay put. But there I'm moving it down like so. Okay, that works out pretty well. I like to pull it toward me a little bit. So I take the slide tool and pull it toward me a little bit away from there. Now I want to aim the light, not just move the source. So I go back to the rotation tool to aim it. If I want to pull it to the right, then I need to move the rotation to the left, like so. I want to try the fall off now. I'm going to turn on the light fall off. I'm going to go over here and manipulate these guys. Pull this one in like that. Not seeing anything. We'll try the outer one then. Move it way out, and then you're going to start seeing it. Notice how the shadows are all cut off there. Shadows are sharply defined because the fall off cuts off the shadows because they're not far enough away. So let's pull it a little bit farther. Now we see the whole shadows. There we go. Now let's adjust the inner one. If I want to point more at the P, pull it to the right a little bit like that. And so you see the fall off can be pretty effective, but it's kind of tricky. You really need to work with it. I'm going to click on the marquee tool here to turn that all off so you can see it without all those lines showing up there. We can go over here and make the shadow a little bit softer. Render that. And see how that comes out. I'll do a little fast forward here. All right, that's one pass. You can see how the light falls off dramatically with the spotlight. And you get the shadows going off the distance. And it's being cut off again here because we need to expand the outer rim there of the light fall off. But I hope you get a sense of how this works in terms of these sort of manual controls. But let's try a keyboard shortcut here. I'll do Control or Command D to turn that off. I'm going to go back to the selection view here. Now I want to point the spotlight using the target. So I hold down the Alt or the Option key. And I get that target and I click. And it's going to point at that spot. Now it doesn't take the light and sort of aim it straight at it. It at least gets just pointing at it from wherever its position is. So the other shortcut is to click on Move to View. And it's already in view, but it does come straight at you now. It comes straight away. I'm going to turn off this light fall off because it does get a little confusing seeing those little guys popping up all the time, those white things there. So that did bring it into view and puts it straight on. Now if I point at the origin, then it points at the 0, 0, 0 point right down there. So these guys are much more helpful when you use the spotlight than when you use the point light or the infinite light. So let's just try this one more time. The rotation tool, I'm going to pull it to the right to move the light left. Left to move it right. Up to move it down. Down to move it up. And take the drag tool to move the entire source and the light along with it. Just moving along like that. Up and down. If I want to move closer or farther away, I take the slide tool. Closer, farther away. And so there you go. I hope that I've managed to unravel the deep, dark secrets of the 3D Spotlight here in Photoshop.